Hello there guys and welcome to the FATBOSS guide to King Rastakhan in the Battle of Dazar'alor.
So this 4-phase fight is pretty long and has a couple of deadly mechanics. It's not really a fight that you can just wing to get through, so understanding everything before pulling him is definitely a good idea. Let's start off the guide by jumping straight into phase 1.
Now the fight starts off with 3 adds, shortly followed by Rastakhan himself. Rastakhan during this phase takes any damage he receives and splits it evenly amongst his 3 adds. You want one tank to take Rastakhan and position him on top of the other tank who has the 3 adds. Now whilst doing so you do have a few things to watch out for. Rastakhan's Serpent Totem will face a random player and breath fire at their location, dealing a large amount of damage to anyone hit. When the totem spawns, swap to it immediately and avoid the breath. Also to dodge is the Plague of Toads. The boss will spawn 3 circles around himself that frogs will appear from and bounce in straight lines shortly afterwards. Getting hit deals damage and applies a pretty nasty dot, so keep an eye on around the boss when this is cast just to quickly avoid them. Moving on to the adds, Prelate Dazar'alor will cast Seal of Purification, which spawns a beam that chases down a random player. This deals a fair amount of ticking damage to anyone it touches, so make sure you kite it away from the raid if you're targeted. For healers to watch out for is the Grievous Axe debuff. Headhunter Galwana applies this to random players, which deals a burst of damage and deals moderate ticking damage until the player is topped up. If you swap and top the player fast, it becomes a non-issue. Siegebreaker Roka will cast Meteor Leap on a random player. After the cast, he'll jump on that player, dealing gigantic nature damage, one-shotting them. This damage fortunately is split between all players within 8 yards, so you want the entire raid to stack on the player to help reduce the incoming damage. Immediately after the leap, Roka will hit the tank with Crushing Leap. This deals a burst of physical damage whilst also applying a debuff that increases the damage you take from this hit by 500%. This is an issue if the leap is cast multiple times throughout the phase, which it shouldn't be if you focus down Roka first. If you do get a second cast, you'll want to tank swap or stack cooldowns to survive the hit. Last to mention is that the Rastakhan tank will be targeted with Scorching Detonation. This deals large damage over 5 seconds and then deals raid-wide damage which can be reduced by having the tank move away from Rastakhan before it expires. You do not need to tank swap on this cast, but if you really wanted to, you could stop the boss from moving around after the cast is finished. Once you got the hang of that and all 3 adds are dead, phase 2 will begin.
Bonsamdi will come down from his throne and will begin to debuff any players within 30 yards of him with a stacking dot. You're going to need to tank him far from the raid to stop players from getting these stacks. You will however need a healer or 2 to stay in range just to keep the Bonsamdi tank alive. Now during this phase, Bonsamdi absorbs all damage, so attacking him is completely pointless. All DPS need to focus on Rastakhan instead. While tanking Bonsamdi, you will be hit with Caress of Death. This places a debuff on you which deals ticking damage and makes you immune to healing for 5 seconds. Healers need to make sure the tank is topped before this cast goes through, and tanks might need to use some form of active mitigation just to stay healthy. Bonsamdi will also debuff players with Death's Door. This debuff deals ticking damage until it expires, where it will spawn a death rift on the location of the player. These rifts are really important for the next phase. You'll want to place these towards Bonsamdi's side of the room. As for Rastakhan in this phase, he has 2 new things to watch out for. The Zombie Dust Totem will now spawn instead of the Serpent's Totem. This will mind control a random player until the totem is killed. What you want to do is crowd control the player and then just nuke down the totem fast to free them. Also to watch out for is the Plague of Fire. This debuff is applied to random people, typically range players. It deals a moderate amount of damage and then will attempt to spread to any players within your targeting circle. Being pre-spread is definitely the best way to deal with this ability, but even if you are on top of other players, you do have a second and a half to move from them before it spreads. Aside from that, you will still have the toads to dodge. Tanks will also still have to deal with a Scorching Detonation. During this phase, you'll actually want to use it as an opportunity to tank swap on Bonsamdi, as you really don't want the aura dot stack on the Bonsamdi tank to stack too high. And that's all it is for this phase until you reach 60% health on Rastakhan and phase 3 begins.
Now Bonsamdi will cast Bonsamdi's Boon. This long cast will drag the nearest half of the raid with him into the Death Realm. You want half of your healers and the rest DPS to be closest to him. You do not want any tanks to go down. Once you go down, there's no way of getting back up until the final phase, so it's important that you get that right. In the Death Realm, Bonsamdi will be in the middle of the room, spam casting Caress of Death on random targets. This is the same as the tank version, but the healing immunity only lasts 3 seconds instead of 5. Healers just need to keep people topped up before they're hit. This is however more difficult as the phase goes on, as everyone downstairs is gaining a stacking dot. People can drop this dot by moving into one of the death rifts that were placed during phase 2. However, doing so will deal a burst of damage to the raid, so you cannot all reset at the exact same time. We have a single player call who to reset and when, just to keep it safe. Down here in the Death Realm, you'll also notice Dread Reaping Shards. These bounce around the room, dealing damage to anyone who stands within them, so you want to avoid them as much as you can. If they do hit a death rift, they'll actually pass over into the living realm above, so people upstairs also have to avoid them. The last thing to watch out for is the inevitable end. This cast is followed by a channel that drags people towards Bonsamdi. If you ever get too close to him during this channel, you'll be immediately one-shot. So during the cast you need to run far from him and run against the dragon effect until the channel is finished. The phase is over the moment Bonsamdi is taken to 50% health, and in our opinion it's the hardest part of the entire fight. We recommend making sure that you save cooldowns before getting dragged down into the death realm, then you lust and nuke him down. We also really recommend that you assign mobile DPS down here just because of the sheer amount of movement that you need to do. Now before we do get into the last phase, let's talk about what happens in the living realm whilst people are in the death realm. The moment Bonsamdi goes down, 3 new ads will appear in the location of where the phase 1 ads died. All of the ads can be crowd controlled for up to 60 seconds, at which point they will become immune, but we recommend just to cleave them all down regardless. You'll want one tank to pick up the Phantom of Retribution and Slaughter with Rastakhan, and the other tank to pick up the Rage. The Retribution and Slaughter both cast Grave Bolt, which is a burst of damage on the tank. This cannot be interrupted. The Slaughter ad will however channel Focus Demise on a player. This deals large damage over its duration, however the player that it's being channeled on can interrupt the ability. You'll want to interrupt it if you can, if not you'll just need to spot heal the target to keep them healthy. The Retribution will cast Seal of Bonsamdi. This spawns multiple zones throughout the room that will explode shortly afterwards, dealing a large amount of damage to anyone within 40 yards. Players however can soak the patches to stop the raid damage from happening, and instead take a burst of damage split between all players within the circles. You do only need a single player, but the damage is pretty high, so ideally you'll want as many people in the zone as possible. As for the Rage, he'll cast Necrotic Smash. This creates a large patch in front of him that when it explodes deals large damage and debuffs any players hit with a 75% healing taken reduction. You can move from the zone before it does explode, and as a tank it's vital that you do so as the Rage already hits pretty hard, and to have a heal and taken debuff on top of that normal damage might just be enough to kill you. As for what ad you want to kill down and focus first, it's kind of up to you, it doesn't matter too much, but we do feel that killing the Retribution ad is probably best as the soak zones deal quite a large amount of damage, but for the most part you just want to cleave them all down as soon as possible. As for Rastakhan during this phase, he'll be gaining a stacking damage increase until the fight is over. This isn't very noticeable as it does stack pretty slowly. He'll still have the Zombie Dust Totem and Scorching Detonation on the tank, and he'll now be casting more Death Stores on players. You still want to place these towards the previous Death Stores, and if there's just too much shit coming out of those, just try and place these Death Stores at the edge of the encounter space. Once you got the hang of that and Bonsamdi hits 50% health, the Death Realm people are brought back into the Living Realm, and the final phase begins.
It's at this point that you'll want to finish off any remaining ads if you have any of them left, and then finish off the boss. This final phase has absolutely no new mechanics at all, it's just a mixture of what you've already seen. You're still going to have the Scorching Detonation, the Plague of Toads, the Plague of Fire, Death Doors, and on top of this he'll spawn even more Death Rifts randomly around him. But all of these abilities are made that bit harder to deal with because of the insane amount of Dread Reaping shards all around the room. For the most part, you've just got to nuke him down before the room becomes so busy that you cannot move into any safe areas to deal with any of the mechanics. By continuing to place Death Rifts on one side of the room or on any edge of the encounter space, you'll make this last phase easier, but even still there is a lot of Dread Reaping shards to dodge. And to make things worse, the boss will cast the inevitable endcast which you saw within the Death Realm from Bonsamdi, which will drag you towards him just like it did in that phase. Again, you just have to move away from him during the cast and run against the pushback during the channel, whilst dodging the shards and potentially toads and fires. But that's the encounter.
Easy peasy. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you do want more information about this fight, or maybe just a phase by phase breakdown just so you can kind of get your head around all of the information for this fight, then do go and check out our written work over on Wowhead. A link for that can be found in the description below. If you did enjoy this video, then make sure you do leave us a like. It does help us out so much. And once again, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Catch you later.